Welcome back. So I'm still reading the national bestseller Salvation, Black People and Love, written by the author Bell Hooks. And I'm in chapter 6, entitled Mama Love, and I'm jumping in. The incredible resiliency of spirit enslaved Black people possessed has often deflected attention away from the legacy of psychological woundedness the experiences of enslavement generated. In the past, Black leaders were so eager to insist that Black folks had triumphed over the evils of slavery and the brutality of racial apartheid that there was little cultural space to talk psychoanalytically about post-traumatic stress and negative scars on the psyche. While historical documents provide evidence proving that newly freed slaves often set up households based on the same principles of coercive domination that they had experienced, these facts have not led to enough discussions about the Black experience of trauma and recovery. It has taken almost a century for people to feel free to talk about the continuum of psychological woundedness that still impacts our collective mental health in Black life. Of course, we see that where I think people just want to disassociate, which is a trauma response from our history of enslavement. So a lot of people will deny. They keep on having to tell you stories like, Black people didn't only come over here because of slavery. I know that. We all know that. But why are you avoiding the fact that many of us are descended from enslaved people? That becomes a source of shame. And then because we're so ashamed, we don't want to see the trauma that is passed down from generation. So the trauma becomes our culture, and then the trauma becomes our DNA. And it's this destructive thing that if we just look at it and admit to the historical roots and the need to break with that culture and work on whatever DNA changes it has made, then we'll be better. Continuing, this reality is nowhere more evident than in the lives of African American women, as it was during slavery that we were first represented as licentious, lustful, untrustworthy betrayers. These racist and sexist stereotypes were first articulated by powerful white men eager to explain away their use and abuse of the Black female body they claimed to hate so much, while secretly lusting for and envying, right? I threw that one in. In a world rooted in patriarchal religious teachings, it was much shrewder for all white folks to blame Black women for abuse by claiming they were monstrous sexual temptresses who lured good, upright white men into sin. By accepting this scenario, white women did not have to acknowledge their connection to white male terrorists and rapists, because who wants to accept you brought some terrorists and rapists into the world, people who stole people, people who raped women, people who killed kids, people who beat people to death? That would make you an awful, awful mother. Moving along, since sexual slavery, i.e. women bound to men in conditions of lifelong servitude and subordination, continued even as slavery based on race ended, Black women still had to face a culture that perceived and still perceives us as the embodiment of these stereotypes. Let me repeat them: licentious, lustful, untrustworthy betrayers. All these factors together sustain a psychological climate that is conducive to the formation of self-hate rather than self-love. Living in a culture that constantly devalues, Black women must work doubly hard to be loving, coping with the stigma of being labeled whores and prostitutes, licentious and lewd, led Black women in the early 20th century to place undue emphasis on puritanical virtue, believing that claiming the status of virtuous womanhood would automatically dispel negative stereotypes, black females often surrendered emotional playfulness and sensuality in favor of a stern maternal stance. This created the same tense division between black women that variations in their color created, for all black women were subject to being seen as either Madonna or whores. Both representations required that black females surrender a complex emotional universe and conform to a stereotype, since a hatred of the female body and its natural function was at the root of both stereotypes. No matter the identity of a black female embraced, Madonna or whore, it was unlikely she would learn to love her physicality. If you are a Madonna, Madonnas are pure gods, like maternal figures that really nobody wants to sleep with because you're just above human. Madonna is someone who's not in touch with their flesh, with their humanity, with their sensuality. We were created by a being, if you believe we were created, or we evolved to have these points on our bodies for pleasure, that our own brains release pleasure chemicals to make us feel good. Pleasure is good. Our body was made, part of our making of our body. So to refuse that part of yourself is to be cut off. And to be a whore, to be perceived as, something demeaning a woman's sexuality, that is also yucky as well. One of the most important contributions that came from a fusion of the 60s Black Power struggle, sexual liberation, and the feminist movement was the emphasis on accepting and loving the body. Ideas from these three movements helped release black women and all women from the tyranny of patriarchal woman-hating, linking the notion that black is beautiful with a vision of female entitlement to sexual pleasure meant that all black women no longer had to fear being judged as without virtue if we were sexual. Black female self-love could be fully realized only when individuals no longer internalized negative stereotypes. Black women who had carried a burden of shame in the mid-1900s and after because they had babies without being married or had to marry because they were pregnant no longer had to suffer disdainful attacks from all sides. The attacks continued, but the way an individual woman coped with being attacked was changed forever. New and better birth control also enabled more black women to enter the 70s asserting positive sexual agency, including ensuring that we were not the victims of unwanted pregnancies. Unlike many of my white female college mates and peers, I and other black women I knew did not use abortion as a means of birth control. We were obsessed with using appropriate contraception so that we would not need abortions. At this time, Shirley Chisholm was among the first feminist women to speak out against unwanted pregnancy. She urged black people to support contraception and abortion when needed. With amazing courage, she called attention to the large numbers of black women who lost their lives seeking unsafe abortions. Chisholm's work was never given the attention it rightfully deserved, largely because she uncovered data that countered racist and sexist stereotypes, which suggested that poor black women, and for that matter, black females of all classes, were eager to give birth so that they could receive welfare. Her work and that of other feminist women show that most mature women, when given options, did not want to bring an unwanted pregnancy to term. Patriarchal male leaders in the black church, with the help of puritanical, punishing matriarchs, intervened on progressive reproductive rights efforts by encouraging black females to believe they would be punished by God if they had abortions. Conservatives, black and white, denounced welfare even though they made and make it difficult for poor black females to receive needed sex education and necessary abortions. If all black communities took a more progressive stance on sexuality and reproductive rights, then there would be fewer unwanted pregnancies. Stick a pin here. So I think people have a right to believe in abortions or not believe in abortions. I think people have a right to believe in anything. I'm not a cultist. What I think you don't have a right is to force your beliefs onto other people. Your beliefs should govern you, right? And what I really hate more than people forcing their beliefs on other people is hypocrisy. You can't tell people to have children, then hate it when they are poor and need your help to send their children to good schools, get food and clothing. Like, make up your mind. What is it you want to force your values on people to tell them they can't abort kids, but when they're born, you want to give them the worst kind of life possible. So that's not tracking. And then the other thing is about punishing matriarchs, about women, black women being unkind to other black women. She's going to say more about this, so I will not preempt. I'll just wait for that. Despite changes in the ways the larger culture thinks about sexuality, many young black females still risk pregnancy because they are responding to the desires of males, usually older, who want not only to be sexual with them, but to do so without using condoms or other birth control devices. To not put herself at risk, a young female has to possess healthy self-esteem that makes it possible for her to not only say no, but to engage as well in the preventative health care that keeps her from placing herself in any situations where she might be in jeopardy. There's little work done on the prevalence of date rape in black communities, yet daily young females are coerced sexually by men. Of course, when coercion is taking place, there is no use of contraceptive device. Revealing tell-all accounts of his own and other black males' rapes of unsuspecting females in the memoir makes me want to holler. A young black man in America, Nathan McCall, tells how his teenage son asked him, quote, "Is it all right to take it from a girl if you take her out and she won't give it up?" End quote. The fact that black females are perceived as a group that men can rape without consequence is part of that continuum of devaluing black female bodies that began during slavery. Can you believe, and it's so prevalent, thinking that because you gave someone some food, you have the right to access their body, putting them at risk of diseases, of potentially death if those diseases go into things like cervical cancer, and creating a child that gives you a lifelong responsibility, all because you exchanged some food. Moving on. Charlotte Pierce Baker has edited a groundbreaking collection of black women's stories of rape, Surviving the Silence, which reminds readers of the extent to which this society has never taken the rape of black women seriously. Knowing this, black females who are raped often say nothing and live with the troubling psychic aftermath of this trauma. Nothing is more heartbreaking in these stories than the lack of support for their recovery. Time and time again, a black female elder blames the victim or demands silence to protect the perpetrator. These were the lessons many black folks learned in the context of slavery. Protect evil rather than correct it. Some black women learned these lessons as well and turned their backs on female victims of male brutality. The thing about in slavery, you had to protect the evil that is massa, because by protecting him, you were protecting yourself, right? Because he could kill you, he could send you somewhere to a worse plantation. And now the new massa is then the black man, the idol, where if you tell that he raped you, you become the person that they're claiming hurt the community by telling. And not him who victimized you, like he is the traitor of the community by not valuing black womanhood. And the community should rise up together to prove that black womanhood is worthy, and exclude him from the community and make him make reparations as the only way of coming back into community. But do we do that? Do we do that? Developing positive self-esteem about our bodies and beings continue to be hardest for black females in a society that consistently represents us negatively. Promoting devaluation and hatred of black females has been absolutely politically strategic within the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. As long as folks hate and fear black women, seeing us as sluts and prostitutes, there's a little chance that masses of white men will ever choose to marry black women. That's not a goal I'm concerned about, but alright. As long as black females are hated and despised, the purity of white families remains intact. So what she's saying is that it's a tact that they're using to prevent intermarriages. But ironically, while contemporary, but no, I have to stop here. But there's also the tact that you're making us undesirable to black men by promoting these things. They're not going to want to be with us either. So you have the single black woman not wanted by whites, not wanted by blacks, not wanted by anyone. Not because of something in ourselves, but because of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Reading, ironically, why contemporary movies like The Bodyguard, Richmond's Wife, and Bulworth exploit the taboo by portraying love relationships between black women and white men. In the end, these bondings are always disastrous. The black female is stereotypically represented as overly sexual, desired only for her body. And in the one film where the black female is married to the rich white male, she's portrayed as an ex-drug addict, user, hoe, betrayer. White supremacist thinking keeps these racist, sexist stereotypes alive in everyone's imagination for a reason. It both encourages and allows for white male lust for black females, even as it encourages this lust to stay on the level of objectification and degradation. So I'm going to stop here. That was heavy. But sometimes we have to go deep, right? That's the only way to heal. Now tell me what you think, and thanks so much for listening.